All right, Nobile Matala, thank you tonight. For more details now, I'm joined by the Labour Department Acting Director General, Viwe Mlenzana. DG, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. 10 million rands in just a space of 3 months in only 3 provinces. Also just touching a tip of the iceberg in terms of the companies that you went to. From the outside, I read that data of enforcement and the compliance that then therefore ensued to suggest that you've been soft on non-compliance up until this point. What was the game changer?
Well, look, thank you very much for having me in the first instance. I'm not sure whether we've been soft, but I think perhaps what we have been doing lately is perhaps we've been sort of more available and there's been more visibility in the manner in which we've been conducting our inspections. And I think largely because we want to drive advocacy, we want to drive compliance, we want to make sure that people are aware of their obligations, we want to make sure that people are able to access their social benefits, as it were. So I think perhaps this particular issue has come to, to some head, if you like, just because we have taken a decision to make sure that we are visible out there.
Yeah. Staffing a business requires a comprehensive understanding of the South African intricate labor laws. Point blank from the start, all 3 at least that we talk of: labor relations, basic conditions of employment, Employment Equity Act, and so on and so forth. What would have led these businesses to operate in such a way that they were in breach of those or non-compliant with those, yet our limited enforcement seems to have allowed them to continue?
Well, look, I think obviously I would be speculating if I were to suggest that I know exactly what had led to people not to comply with the law. I can only surmise by suggesting that perhaps people, have thought that they might be able to get away with it, which is sometimes, unfortunately, human nature, that sometimes people tend to want to take a shortcut. So I put it down to that. I certainly think, though, that the more that people, become aware of what is it that they need to do, the more that they will do the right things. Also, we have an obligation on our side to make things slightly easier for businesses to comply. For instance, we are hard at work to ensure that we bring technology at the heart of how we do business. There is absolutely no reason in our day and age that these vulnerable workers cannot access these services in the comfort of their lounges, as it were. Yeah. So these are some of the aspects that we are trying to drive going forward. Certainly, the compliance bit is just but one aspect of what we're trying to do.
So in your streamlining of enforcement and enhancing compliance, what did you find is the biggest area of non-compliance? Minimum wage, upholding equity, documentation. What is it that you find was the biggest area of non-compliance?
So there are 2 areas in the main that concern us. The biggest one by far is in the area of health and safety. Unfortunately, we still find a lot of employers out there that do not comply with the basics. For instance, as an example, that the law suggests that if ever you employ an X number of employees, you've got to have, first aiders, for instance. You've got to have committees that look at the health of employees, et cetera, et cetera. So things as basic as that, we find that employers are not necessarily complying with. But obviously, some others are much more serious than that. We have found instances in other companies where employees actually, have died. There are installations that are not safe. So that's, some of the aspects that we're finding on the occupational health, on the occupational laws. But also, we do find some concerning issues regarding basic conditions of employment. We do find issues with the Minimal Wage Act, as it were, where employers are not necessarily complying with the laws. The figure, for instance, that you quoted earlier on of 10 million rand plus, that is basically money that is owed to employees out there that employers have not necessarily been have not paid over to employees. So yes, you do find areas where you might even be bold enough to suggest that it's exploitative in nature, and it is our duty and obligation to make sure that we stem those out.
Yeah. How are you upholding the protection of vulnerable workers? Because, I mean, for us in the media, maybe for you, you were looking at something else, but certainly on social media, one of the things that would have drawn our attention was that exchange by one of the workers in a particular restaurant. Then we then saw you, therefore, going to that restaurant in Tshwane. And that was a vulnerable voice. So some are vulnerable in these sectors, but they don't have an outlet where they can actually be heard.
Yeah, so, I mean, so there are two approaches that we take to our compliance. The first one is what we refer to as proactive enforcement, which is, the inspections that we conduct on a regular basis. The second one is what we refer to as reactive enforcement. This is a case in point that you have actually mentioned, where we had an alert from the member of the public to some, sort of activities that were suggesting that law was being not complied with. So certainly we can never, never ever be able to cover all the angles in terms of presence in the country. So it is for that reason that we do want to partner up with civil society, with organized labor, with business, so that they can also be they can play an advocacy role in this particular aspect. So, for instance, we do engage quite a bit with employer organizations. We do engage quite a bit with organized labor. So it is for that reason that we believe that to an extent that we are able to educate the public out there, the better the compliance would be. We think that just putting up and increasing our capacity of inspections is not necessarily going to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Education plays a big role towards compliance. Yeah. So does making it easy for people to comply. To an extent that we're making it easy for smaller businesses and others to comply, we think that that will increase levels of compliance with labor laws in our country.
So compliance education, more than, because there's three legs, it's the compliance education, it's the inspection, and then you are now in the third one, which is the enforcement. So you're saying more than the inspection, you would want to invest a little bit on the compliance education.
Absolutely. I think we can't, overemphasize that, right? Because if people are aware of their obligations, I don't believe that generally people seek to do the wrong things. I'm talking about an average person here. But sometimes, we tend to, not intentionally so, sometimes make it difficult for them to comply because our processes perhaps are not easy. Our laws are not easy to understand. How they interface with us in terms of technology is not necessarily there. So it is a multi-pronged approach that we have to take. For instance, to an extent that an employer is unable to get an audit from us, if ever they give us a declaration on the compensation fund side of things within a certain space of time, it then discourages them because we're not necessarily being responsive. So these are aspects that we need to work on, including, however, our own culture of work and work ethic within the department itself.
So South Africans are looking at these numbers, the fact sheet that you gave us. Now, 1,941 foreign nationals found in about 2,681 inspections conducted. Only 81 foreign nationals arrested. I'm saying all the rest are documented, and if they are documented, how far are they sticking and complying with the framework of scarce skills?
So, very good question, by the way. Yes, 1,941 of the colleagues were found to be foreign nationals. Of course, 81 of those were undocumented, which then suggests that the majority of them were actually having the right kind of documents. The key question, though, and I think that's what you're suggesting, to what extent are those foreign nationals occupying jobs that ordinarily should have been occupied by South Africans? And we do find quite a lot that in many instances, these particular jobs are occupational categories that we regard as not scarce skills. There is an allowance in our law that companies can import rare and scarce skills into the country so that we can then facilitate economic growth. But where these jobs are easily, or these particular roles are easily obtainable in terms of skill in the country, we believe that, and the law suggests that those should be given to South Africans from a preference point of view.
Yeah. And is that an enforceable area?
Well, so let me put it to you this way. It is enforceable. Are there some gray areas? Yes, there are. It is for that reason that we are updating the law. We are introducing a national migration policy to deal specifically with some of these particular aspects so that we can tighten up on what is a scarce skill, what categories are relevant for employees that are coming from a different country that they can then occupy, and what would be regarded as a job that South Africans should be preferred for. So we're trying to clean up on some of those issues. We're also trying to clean up in terms of the gaps that exist between the migration and national migration policy versus the immigration laws, so that those two talk to each other.
Yeah. When are you going to deal with your counterparts, the other arms of government? I'm having a conversation a little bit later tonight. Labour is condemning the rampant, they're saying, defaulting of employers there who are not paying their financial obligations, those being pension funds, contributions.
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm saying, I'm talking to Samuel a little bit later on tonight, and they are decrying the rampant non-compliance of municipalities, especially in the Free State this time around, but there have been other municipalities as well, who are not paying their financial obligations as far as pension fund contributions. So I'm asking you as the department, when are you doing raids on your counterparts, on the other arms of government?
Well, so the way that it works, as it were, we obviously looking at high risk, which obviously would be profiled within our environment. That would suggest that that's where the intervention is required. And to an extent that those areas that you are highlighting are suggesting to us that they require attention, we will attend to them.
All right, DG, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on this
Thank
evening.
You very much.
That is the acting Director General at the Department of Employment and Labour. Right.